What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Boozer here. Thanks for stopping by. Well, today we're going to be talking about the Sky fusion that just dropped. We're going to go through the schedule, and then we're going to talk about how to do this fusion if you so choose so. So let's jump right into it. Right now we have the Summon Rush that's ongoing right now. This is probably the event that you want to check first to see if you're actually able to do this fusion. So we look here, nothing too unreasonable, 3200 for the first 15 fragments. Pretty deep summon rush, so there's lots of extra goodies if you want to go crazy out there. There is a boosted value for ancient shards, so instead of the usual 25 ancient shards per sacred shard, there's actually the value of it is 12.5 ancient shards per sacred shard, which is actually okay value. There's also that guarantee for Shemnath, which is 150 ancient shards for Shemnath if you so choose to go for her. She is a decent, maybe slightly below average champion, power crept for sure. From what I've seen from the community, it doesn't seem like people are too excited about her or her guarantee. This is the first ancient guarantee since Christmas, and people are not excited. So people, yeah, she's a nuker, but she also has debuffs, which requires accuracy. Sorry, she requires accuracy in her kit to remove the buffs. So not ideal. She hits okay, hits pretty good actually with decent multipliers. Has kind of a unique passive. Increases the accuracy and then increases the crit damage. Her A3 is interesting, got like a strip and then a hit with the ignore defense, so she can be pretty good, but yeah, she's not too exciting. Most people are not super excited about her for sure based on what I've seen. So she is active right now, her guarantee, and if you wanted to partake in that, it makes the summon rush a lot easier. So as per normal, almost Dungeon Diver starts on day 2. So for day 1, we're not going to be going too crazy with our energy inboxes and using gems and all that stuff. So right now we have the Ice Golem tournament active. So on day 1, we're probably just going to be using our free energy for Ice Golem. And then if you want to partake in the Summon Rush, the Summon Rush is there for you. You will see that we are allowed to miss 10 fragments. So 10 fragments is the allowable miss. That means we can miss the second part of the Summon Rush if you so choose. If you saw, the second part of the Summon Rush is actually it's actually cheap relative to the first one, right? So they front loaded the points on the first fragment, knowing that the second one is very close. So you could theoretically skip this 10 fragments here, but it's pretty cheap to pick it up. So I would say pick up both of these fragments and then reassess where you want to skip those 10 fragments later on in the fusion. So I would say do the Summon Rush. So the Ice Golem you're going to be completing during the Dungeon Divers here. So keep in mind that the Dungeon Divers is probably going to cost you 3.7k points as per normal that Plarium has been doing. 3.7k points generally means it's going to cost you between 5 and 5.5 thousand energy, depending on what dungeon you can efficiently do. But usually the most efficient dungeons are about 0.7 points per energy. So yeah, you're looking at about 5,000 energy here. So ideally you don't spend all 5,000 in Ice Golem, even though there is a very nice cursed event going on for Ice Golem right now. So you want to save some of that energy for Fire Knight. Keep in mind that both of these, all the dungeon tournaments, Ice Golem, Fire Knight, Spider, Dragon, they take approximately 2,500 energy to finish. So you could theoretically split that energy cost on both Ice Golem and Fire Knight, and then have both of those tournaments finish off the dungeon event for you, so you don't waste energy. So what you don't want to do is basically go all in on Ice Golem day 1 and then run out energy for Fire Knight. That's what you don't really want to do. So ideally I would recommend to space them out, space out your energy spending. Champion training event, you're gonna kind of have to do it on the side. You could go ice golem and like do some solo champions, train some additional food that way while farming dungeons. But you're probably gonna be hitting up campaign for some champion training as well. It's also gonna add up for dungeon divers. Or theoretically, you could skip the 10 here and then set yourself up for a more chill start to this fusion if you so choose. Classic arena tournament, no big deal. 1, 2 classic arena tournaments. Artifact enhancement events, again, standard 3 here. You're going to need about 20 million silver per event. There's going to be a little bit of a lull here during the Fire Night. So ideally, I guess you would front load the you probably front load the ice golem, or you can spend 2.5k energy in ice golem. You're going to spend a little bit of energy in your campaign for training, and then you're going to spend a little bit of energy in the Fire Night here. And then the second half of the Fire Night, you're probably going to finish off with the start of the next Dungeon Divers. There's a little bit of a lull here. There's no CVC or anything. We just finished the CVC, so there's a little bit of a lull here. And then afterwards, we're going to go right into another champion training with Dragon. Generally, this is pretty good just because Dragon does allow you more food farming options. But again, it is paired up with the champion chase here, which is pretty good because you can obviously pull food and train at the same time. So that's pretty good. And lastly, we have our last Dungeon Divers with a spider tournament. So you're looking at probably like maybe like 1,000 energy or 500 energy in the end of Fire Night to start off the Dungeon Divers. After that, you're probably going to go full energy into the Dragon Tournament. So it's going to be close to 5k, 4.5k, 5k energy into Dragon Tournament while you're doing your training. So training could be done in campaign as well. So that's where the energy is going to go here. And then afterwards, it's going to be all spider for that final Dungeon Divers. So 5.5k energy into spider, most likely at the end of the fusion. So personally, looking at the schedule, it's pretty nicely spaced out, I think. The Dungeon Divers, they have singular focus events attached to them. Like, for example, this Dungeon Diver, you're going to pair up with a dragon. You have one training tournament, and then this Dungeon Diver is basically just spider. And of course, you could put a little bit of energy from the first dragon into the first Dungeon Divers, but it seems pretty spaced out pretty well. So there's not too many complaints there. Overall, it doesn't seem overly tricky. Obviously, managing the energy per day is going to be difficult for some of you guys if you guys are trying to attempt this with limited resources. And we could have a look at the 10 fragments that we can skip. So if we look at the 10 fragments that we can skip, let's say we've done all the events leading up to the second half of the fusion here, we could theoretically skip, for example, 2 Dungeon Divers, which is pretty good value if you wanted to skip the 2 Dungeon Divers, because it's generally pretty big energy savings by skipping the Dungeon Divers. But you still have to spend some energy to complete the tournaments that are going alongside them. So for example, if you wanted to skip the Dungeon Diver here and then skip the Dungeon Diver here, you're still going to need to spend roughly half that energy to complete the Dragon and the Spider tournament. So it really depends on what resources your account has. And then you can make a decision on what you want to skip. Assuming that the champion chase will be a singular 15, then we won't be able to skip anything from the champion chase. However, I think it might be broken up into a 5 and a 10. Then if you're low on shards or pulls, then you can skip the second half of the champion chase. Keep in mind that this weekend is likely going to be 2x sacreds. So you might be interested in pulling some sacred shards for your champion chase. Keep in mind that sacred shards, even with the 2x boost, is not generally going to give you super high value for a champion chase, just because the expected outcome is still very likely going to be an epic. So keep that in mind. You still need a good amount of sacreds to pull during a champion chase to complete it, even during a 2x event. And lastly, I think we don't keep in mind, we also don't consider winning tournaments as part of our point totals. For example, you can win a tournament, but a training tournament or a champion chase. We don't bank on these extra 20 fragments here. So realistically speaking, we only have 10 allowable to skip, which is, you know, kind of standard. They definitely could take that away from us and it would be, you know, a little bit of a bad surprise, but it's nice to have the 10 fragments to skip for some flexibility when you're doing some fusions. But I think generally people will probably want to skip either the 2 dungeon divers or 1 dungeon diver and 1 artifact enhancement events. It seems like most people have issues with silver events like the artifact enhancement or energy events like the dungeon diver. So like I said, if you skip 1 dungeon diver, it's still going to save you significant amounts of energy, especially if you don't have like gems or anything like that stored up. But you still have to spend roughly half of that just to complete the tournament events that are ongoing. So you're not going to save the full dungeon diver amount. The other way you can probably reassess your 10 free fragments is do every event up until the champion chase. So even this last dungeon diver, and then once we have a look at the champion chase, whether it's broken up into 5 or 10, you can decide whether you want to skip the last 10 of the champion chase, or you can actually skip 2 of the spider done, or the last dungeon divers, or the last artifact enhancement event. So you could full skip the spider and you can full skip the last dungeon diver event, and that's going to be a full, you know, 5,500 energy savings, which is, you know, not too bad if you wanted to go that route. Or you can skip the last little bit of the champion chase if the fragments are split up. So you do have some options here. Honestly, I think the schedule is very reasonable. I think there's no funky, tricky business going on. And yeah, I think it's nicely spaced out. It is over about 13 days, which is pretty standard. But yeah, let me know in the comments below what you guys think. The fusion itself is a little bit questionable from what I've seen everybody talking about. Personally, from my playtest, he seems pretty reasonable, especially with the limited synergies that we have right now. We basically only use him with Fellhound, since Fellhound is probably the best candidate to be used with Skyak. Personally, from my playtest, he seems okay. He seems good enough to use, and I'm definitely going to go for him just because of his kind of unique 2-turn taunt on a 3-turn cooldown. I think there is maybe some possibility that this can be used in some content. And of course, you know, he seems okay. He's not going to be insane, but generally from what I've been reading from people and from what I've been watching, he's not generating that much excitement. So I hope that Plarium is kind of getting some of that feedback, and then they're going to, you know, hype him up a little bit by maybe releasing another companion that works with him. Anyways, guys, that's gonna be it for the video. Hopefully it was helpful for you guys. Let me know in the comments below if you guys plan on going for Packmaster Shyak. Yeah, the fusion schedule, like I said, it looks very reasonable. So day 1 is going to be a pretty chill day. Just use your free energy just to tackle a little bit of ice golem. Don't go too crazy, and then of course you can work on some of your champion training on day 1. But we're going to save most of the action for day 2 when the dungeon divers drops. And of course, if you guys are interested in the summon rush with the Shemnaf guarantee, best of luck on your pulls, of course. Personally, I think I'm going to pull for Shemnaf because the ancient value is boosted for the summon rush. You get some pretty good value for it. I have a lot of ancient shards here, so I don't mind getting a champion out of it. I'm pretty early on in my mercy as well, so even if I don't pull a legendary, I'm set up pretty well for like a 1+1 in the future, because if you pull this legendary on 150 shards, your mercy doesn't reset, so you're pretty set up for a 1+1, for example. And ancient shards in general just aren't crazy value nowadays, so I don't mind spending it here, even though it's kind of a not so useful champion for me, but it's just an extra faction guardian potentially. But yeah, anyways, guys, let me know all of this in the comments below. Best of luck on everything. We'll be in touch, and yeah, thanks for watching the video. Appreciate your time, and I'll see you guys in the next one.